Daggerheart needs more love. At least the campaign frames, in a very specific way. So Colossus of the Drylands is my favorite. From the adversaries that are included to a more concrete storyline, I think it's the gold standard for campaign frames, and I'd like to turn the other campaign frames into that as well. But before we discuss that, introductions. Hey folks, before we get into that, let me introduce myself. My name is VJ Harris, my pronouns are he, him, they, them, and something funny. I am a full-time tabletop role-playing designer and professional GM. You might recognize my name from things such as MCDM Productions, Arcadia, Flea Mortals, and An Elf and an Orc, How Little Baby, volumes 1 through 4. Alright, back to the video. Now, before we dive into this, I want to make it clear that me saying Drylands is the gold standard isn't me saying that all the others suck. I look at all the others between a B- and an A range, and Drylands an A+. None of them are bad. Drylands is just better in my opinion. But on a side note, while this isn't an ad, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Pistol Hearts Volume 1 and 2, an expansion on the Wild West themes in Colossus of the Dryland by Cisco Carlos himself. Now, back to the video. Before I dive into what I want for the other frames, let's talk about Colossus of the Drylands, what I think it does really well. A prosperous region of gunslingers and outlaws has fallen into terror as colossal creatures awaken from beneath the earth. The Drylands were a place that put the old stories aside. While superstitious miners have long said that the crystals growing wild in this desert are made from the very life essence of forgotten gods, the folk around here had real work to do and actual deities were left for campfire stories. That is, until a massive colossus answered the call of something ancient and apocalyptic, rising from the earth and devastating the lands. The bold prospectors, tired laborers, and born-again worshippers in the dusty town of Wyland's Gulch were thrown from their routine of industry and exploitation, forced to raise scattered armies and watch them die to the behemoth's strength. And this is only the first of many titanic beasts poised to terrorize the land. In a Colossus of the Drylands campaign, you'll play a heroic posse of mavericks who must save their home from a legion of colossi and a primordial god seeking revenge. It's got everything all the other frames have. The pitch, overview, the inciting incident. Now, the place where I find it to be better than the other campaign frames is simply the hunts and interludes. The hunts and interludes literally set up the entire campaign. There's 9 Colossus in total that need to be fought. Ikiri, Injuries Untold, Dakadai, the Cleaver, Poi, Sky Skimmer of the Dust Sea, and Kalir, the Virulent Hate, and her 100 children have already been created and can be used as 4 of the 9, and there's 23 other named Colossi to get ideas from. Each time a Colossus is killed, some time passes, the interlude where the players deal with their own personal stuff that's happening around them, and then a new Colossus rises, and rinse and repeat until the end. Now, it doesn't have every single little thing you've got to do, but it goes beyond just the inciting incident and gives enough strength. Injuries Untold already has an adversary block to use, and example features for the Colossus give even more ability examples that aren't all present with the carry. And then, of course, there's the other 3 Colossus. Over half the work when it comes to having Colossus to fight has already been done at this point. Of course, this isn't everything you could possibly need. You need to populate the world with bartenders, cattle rustlers, desperados, moguls, snipers, sheriffs, and deputies, corrupt and virtuous alike, reclusive gunsmiths, marshals, dead men that won't stay dead, all of which and more can be found in Pistol Heart Volume 2. Once again, this isn't an ad. I just really like the product, and I'm using it in my Drylands start playing game. Also, you can check out a review of both Pistol Heart Volume 1 and 2 right here. But now that we covered the epitome of a campaign frame, to me, let's talk about the others, starting with the Witherwild. When an invading nation attacks an ancient forest deity, a virulent overgrowth spreads throughout the land. Vanewick was once a place of great abundance and peace, generous to those unfamiliar with the land, but a cornucopia to those who respected its ways. When Haven invaded the wilds and forced the land into eternal spring, a dangerous bloom known as the Witherwild took hold and now threatens the lives of all who live there. In a Witherwild campaign, you'll play unlikely heroes from humble beginnings who are reckoning with their newfound duty to save Vanewick's people from dangerous corruption. The inciting incident. The Reaping Eye is stowed in a secure vault beneath the central tower of Haven's Wizarding School, seemingly impossible to recover. A secretive and dangerous rebel group led by a mysterious figure known only as the Fane Wraith, she, her, has hatched a plan to end the curse of the Witherwild, find the great owl Nicta, and pluck out the Sowing Eye. While this may solve the immediate problem, the long-term consequences are not being considered, just as they weren't when Haven invaded. Haven's beleaguered spy master, Creel Dern, he, him, is not a popular person in Haven. He is responsible for rooting out insurgents, stopping schemes before they've had a chance to start, and keeping a close watch on Haven's internal activities. Creel has never agreed, at least not openly, with Archmage Phylax's they-them decision to steal the Reaping Eye, and the consequences they've all paid for that decision have been grimly vindicating. Recently, Creel uncovered the Fainwraith's plot and is horrified by the possibility of her success. Knowing he can't send a troop of Haven soldiers deep into the woods to hunt down and stop the Fainwraith from stealing the Sowing Eye, Creel uses his vast network of informants and spies to find a group of adventurers who can bring the Fainwraith to swift justice. The party is sent an invitation from Haven to meet with Creel. But is his information correct? Does he have his own motivation or secret ambition? Whether they come from Fainwick or Haven, the party must extend some trust to a person who is equally as dangerous and mercurial as the enemy they pursue. And what will they do when they find the Fainwraith? Bring her to justice, side with her, attempt to recover the Reaping Eye? Creel advises the party to start their hunt for the Fainwraith in the treetop village of Alula, where he suspects she runs her operation. The corruption. Adversaries and environments in this campaign can gain an additional type called Withered. When an adversary is withered, describe how the Witherwild changed or impacted how they would normally appear or operate. You also need about 20 Wither tokens. These can be the same as the tokens you use for Fear. Anytime a PC takes severe damage from a withered adversary or environment, gain a Wither token and place it on the PC's character sheet. When you do, the PC must roll their Fear die. If they roll equal to or below the number of Wither tokens on their sheet, they immediately gain a scar and clear all tokens, describing how the Witherwild changes them permanently. For those of you that have forgotten or don't know what a scar is, it's literally just you mark off one of your hope boxes permanently. At the end of each session, clear all Wither tokens from the PC sheets and gain an equal amount of Fear. If a character ever dies with Wither tokens on their sheet, their body is permanently taken over by the Witherwild. Generally speaking, I like this, but I would also like some variety in how the Witherwild affects people, right? And maybe it's based on the creature. Maybe a specific tier of adversaries, instead of making a scar, you get a -1 to specific rolls, or another tier adds disadvantage, something like that, right? I'm not 100% sure how I would handle that at this point. Now, the adventure. To start this off, one of the most important things to know is Fainwraith is corrupted by the Witherwild. She's lasted longer than most have for some strange reason, unbeknownst to her. To you, the game master, she's a demigod. She's related to some faint divinity, and it's helping send the tide of infection, but it won't last forever. She wants to take the Sowing Eye in hopes it stops the disease, because what's keeping her alive is also cursing her. Any treatments that she's tried thus far simply haven't worked, and it's not just because the treatments aren't working. Maybe she has tried something that would work, but she can't because she's part demigod. Now, due to a combination of her faint divinity and being infected with the Witherwild, she can't die. She'll reform somewhere in the Witherwild, typically nearby where she died. It's like the Witherwild is continuously bringing her back. So even if they defeat her, she's a recurring problem until the players find a way to stop her permanently. Now, this game can go a few different ways. If you choose to side with her, there are now guardians, humanoids, and creatures alike that will die to protect the faint divinities from any new turmoil brought on by mortals. The exact location of these divinities are kept secret, when before they were known, but their homes were respected and feared, so most dare not approach. Even with the Fainwraith's help, it's going to be hard to get the Sowing Eye, and even if it's gone, there will be dire consequences. The land will fall into famine, people will die. Even if it's returned, there will be a period of time where things just don't grow. People will still die. They can pretend to side with her while sabotaging her plans without her knowing what's going on as well. If they choose to stop her, but also try to get the Reaping Eye from Haven, the easiest way to do it would be to get into Keel's good favor, which means being agents of Haven throughout Fainwick. This should cause tension between the people of Fainwick and any players that are from Fainwick. They are seen as doing the oppressor's bidding. Whichever way the players choose, the cycle of these things can be broken down into two categories, and yes, I am stealing this from Colossus of the Drylands: faction objectives and interludes. Faction objectives for Haven will include putting down any rebellions done by Fainwick citizens within Haven's territory, confiscating any materials that could be useful for delaying or spreading the disease, and just generally being sent out to do the nation's bidding, all the while trying to either gain Creel's trust or find a way to get inside on your own. Faction missions for the Fainwraith include interrogating people for information about where the faint divinities are, for the time being, helping the Witherwild spread as to keep Haven occupied while they search. Fainwraith will give them a drop of her blood to be used to not be targeted by the Witherwild. The effects are temporary, unlike true corruption, given what's going on in her anatomy. They will also include defeating Haven agents as they terrorize Fainwick. The Adversaries. Okay, I know that Drylands needed new stat blocks because Carlos introduced new creature mechanics, Colossus, but I also feel pretty confident that we'd have gotten some new adversaries, even if that wasn't needed. So I'm going to keep this as a critique, right? I want some campaign-specific adversaries, so doing what I do best, I went through all my monster manuals, found some monsters I thought would fit the theme, and converted them. There's the Festering Hulk, previously the Fester Hulk from Crooked Moon, and the infected Moss Boar from Seeds of Decay. The Festering Hulk is a dead giant covered in ever-growing fungus that's taken over the body and has it lumbering around. It's a tier 2 solo, it spreads fungus everywhere it walks, it's got a spore cloud it can poison people with, and it can disgorge a mass of itself and create a slime mode. The Slime mold is a tier 1 minion that could split itself, but the original slime mold and all its other molds dry up and die after 1d4 rounds based on the original mold. Now, the infected moss bear is a tier 1 bruiser. It's got Relentless 2. When it drops to 0 HP, it's instead at 1 HP. It has a charge ability I pulled directly from the fur bulk and a petrifying mud blast that restrains and paralyzes the target. I'm not looking for a bazillion new stat blocks, right? Just some new things plus some suggestions on what we should pull from the official adversaries. I think some good ones for this particular campaign frame would be the Deep Root Defender, Dire Wolf, Giant Mosquito, and stuff along that line. 5 banners burning. Long brewing tensions between rival nations boil over, threatening all-out war. 5 years into an armistice that ended a decade of warfare, the threat of renewed conflict looms over the continent of Alphys. 5 nations in a delicate web of alliances and rivalries seek to exploit the opportunities granted by this period of rapid magical, political, and social change. All 5 nations deploy agents to strengthen alliances, sabotage foes, and tip the balance of power in their favor. In a 5 banners burning campaign, you'll play heroes caught up in the twisting and ever-escalating conflict between nations, contending with competing loyalties, generational grudges, and opportunistic villains. The inciting incident. Clover of Towers, Order-born Furbolg, they, them, the child of Jesthane's revolutionary hero, Adamant Towers, Order-born Furbolg, she, her, was kidnapped on the way to a political marriage to Enchanter Kalashay, lore-born Orc, she, her, a rising star in Polaris' high circle of mages. Polaris is wary of Jesthane's claim that Clover has been kidnapped and demands that Jesthane follow through with the political marriage. Voldane denies any involvement and sends a diplomatic investigative party to Lightning Valley, a border town known both for the giant lightning rods that protect town from magical storms and for hosting the talks that ended official hostilities between Voldane and the revolutionary faction. However, days later, reports tell of some kind of disaster during the initial meetings between Voldane and Jesthane's representative. The party is sent to Lightning Valley to investigate what happened. There they find representatives from other nations doing the same. The apprentice of a disappeared mage inquisitor, a divine seeker from Hilltop investigating potential divine implications, a Voldine judge who once served as the town's magistrate returning to visit family, and a merchant diplomat from Armada. The following NPCs comprise the cast embroidered in this mystery. Clover of Towers wants to make their mother proud and find a way to be happy far from home. Before their kidnapping, they were last seen drinking with city guards at Three Poles Tavern, built between several lightning poles. They were too young to fight in the war, and they have a sense of inferiority about not having bled for the freedom they now enjoy. Oziver of Storms, Sheriff of Lightning Valley, Ridgeborn Simia, he, him, is trying to keep the peace but is quickly becoming overwhelmed by the attention and stakes. Oziver is eager for help but needs reassurance of any outsider's goodwill. He knows that a city guard was last to be seen with Clover, but he's convinced the still missing guard isn't to blame. Cerulean Prism, apprentice mage inquisitor of Polaris, lore-born Clank, he, him, is quiet and diligent, though worried by Clover's sudden disappearance. While working for Enchanter Kalashay, Cerulean managed correspondence with Clover during the marriage negotiation. They've fallen for the Faubourg and will take reckless action to find them. Clover. Kostrin, Seeker of Hilltop, Order-born halfling, she, her, is a formidable presence used to being obeyed. She takes over the local temple as her base of operations, conscripting the clergy for a divination ritual that will locate Clover. She tells anyone that will listen of her visions that proves foul play by the mages of Polaris. Kostrines is exaggerating the certainty of this vision to stoke renewed conflict so that Hilltop can claim more fertile land. Zeshtan, County Judge of Voldane, highborn dwarf, they, them, is an elderly dwarf with a compelling silence about them that people can't help but fill with conversation. They volunteered for the inquiry so they could visit their grandniece, a cobbler residing in the town. A dedicated art collector, Zeshtan, hopes to procure embargoed tapestries from Goldrail, which could lead to exposing the merchant's true identity as a spy. Goldrail, merchant of Armada, seaborn elf, he, him, is a charming but hapless-seeming textile merchant. This image of incompetence is a cover he deploys to throw off suspicion of his true agenda. In truth, Goldrail is an Armadian spy dispatched to ensure the marriage happens as planned. The original investigators arrived 2 days after Clover's disappearance and set out into the hills to the east, but have not checked in for over a week. Did they suffer the same fate as the Furbolg? What help from the townsfolk did the kidnappers have, and who else knows about it? Which enemies of Jesthane, Polaris, or Armada were in position to sabotage the marriage? Was the marriage sabotaged by someone within Jesthane for other reasons? Did some danger or threat lead Clover from the town without their escort? Or was this part of Clover's plan all along, a chance to live free of their mother's expectations? Which of the second wave of investigators will be the first to learn where Clover went? Who escalates the violence first? And what version of the story catches on like wildfire? The adventure. Okay, so at the end you see the, or was this part of Clover's plan all along, a chance to live free of their mother's expectations? I think going that angle is the way to go here, and here's how I would do it. Clover has freshly turned 18, but she's essentially been promised to Enchanter Calichet, who's 20 now, for the past 2 years. Over the course of that time, when she wasn't sending letters, she's also come to visit Polaris, as that's where she would be living. The interactions between the betrothed have been heavily monitored given the importance of the wedding and their age. However, while their interactions, as I said, are heavily monitored, they do have some freedom to explore the city that will be their new home, always accompanied by guards. One that is wandering with them as if they are merely friends in plain clothes, and at least another, if not more, trailing behind an actual guard. Now, Clover and the plainclothes guard, Zilkia Hazewind Lowborn, check it out right here, over the course of the next 2 years grow very close. This can either be romantic or purely platonic, but either way, they both share an interest in leaving their current situations. Zilkia wishes to leave but cannot because not only is her ailing mother in the city, she's under a servitude contract for many more years to come, the cost to afford care for her mother. 6 months before the wedding, during one of Clover's visits, Zilkia shares that her mother has died and there is no reason for her to stay, and asks Clover to run away with her. Clover says yes, but preparations must be made so they don't get caught. 1 month before the wedding, the meeting between the Voldane and Jestane representatives in Lightning Vale takes place. A diversion can be caused there, and then they can run off together. Now, everything we just learned about Zilkia is a lie. The guard is a shapeshifter spy, but for who? One of the other nations, or a sixth party interested in seeing the fragile peace shatter? The real Zilkia Hazelwind has been replaced by this shape changer, Huck Any-All Slyborn. Zilkia can be alive or dead. Huck could have kidnapped her and held her captive this entire time, or paid her handsomely and gotten all the information it could out of her before replacing her and sending her away. The real Zilkia hates her mother. She's the reason Zilkia has the contract in the first place. Zilkia didn't volunteer. Her mother handed her over to pay for her treatments. When the players head out to find Clover, they can if you decide they do find her, right? Because it's been like at least a week, if not more, by the time they actually, get out to the hills and stuff. They find the other investigators dead, right? Huck is a tier 4 solo assassin who easily dispatched the other investigators before Clover even realized they were following them. If you decide the players find Huck and Clover, you can do this in a couple of ways. One, Clover could be out on her own accord, as in Huck and Clover are operating as if they're two people in this runaway thing together, and Clover is none the wiser about the additional plot. Or Clover could be confined in a magical cage that moves itself with a command word, right? You can also, depending on how dire you want to make this campaign, you can have them come across Clover and Huck fighting, and Huck accidentally kills Clover. If they actually find Clover and Huck, a fight breaks out. Huck should escape to be a reoccurring villain, but if you kill them, no big deals, right? Regardless of what happens in this interaction when they meet each other, you do need to show that Huck is a shape changer. Like that, I think, is a core part of this, and it can either be Huck trying to impersonate one of the other players to get to throw something off after throwing down like a smoke bomb or something, or Huck could take a severe amount of damage and then the face kind of shifts for a moment, right? With whatever combination of alive or dead Clover and Huck are, if you do have the players meet them, the players return and give their findings to their respective higher-ups. The rest of the campaign is spent unraveling who was responsible for the Clover and Huck of it all. Now, if I was running this, more than likely I'd have it be a secret six-party weapons dealers trying to spark the war effort to gain more profit. Now, the adversaries. I've got 2 new stat blocks. First, we've got the Hilltop Priest. They are a tier 1 support and have a mace and the Divine Touch ability, which gives them access to essentially 3 domain cards: Bolt, Beacon, Mending Touch, and Reassurance, and Divine Favor, which was converted from D&D 5e, which essentially empowers weapons to be blessed with magical energy. Now, next up is Huck. So Huck is a tier 4 solo, as I mentioned. I expect Huck to be around for a while, kind of messing with the players. I also think Huck is the type of person that likes to play with his food, so that can also explain why she doesn't try to kill them, even though she's tier 4 and she could. Now, of course, if you want to kill her in the first game, feel free to do so. But if you don't, you've got a lot to work with her, right? So they've got Espionage and Intrusion as experience, Relentless twice, Won't See It Coming so they can be hidden, Cloaked, which lets them get hidden and do a fuck ton of damage while hidden, 4d12 plus 6 plus whatever bonuses, a fuck ton of direct damage, actually, that's what it was. It doesn't give additional damage, but it does make it so they can't negate it with fucking armor. Gather Secrets, which lets them do the spy part of their job, Momentum, which allows them to gain a fear, as it attacks people. Subtle Blade, which lets them do more damage against a vulnerable target. I'm realizing that I didn't give them an ability that makes a target vulnerable, so I need to do that so it synergizes with the rest of the adversary block. And then, of course, Trap Master, which allows them to deploy a trap near a creature they run past to stall them. I might change that up a little bit, like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. Now, I did debate on explicitly putting something about shape changing in there, but I thought maybe it would be fine not to since the description explicitly mentions they are a shape changer. But since I'm already going to go ahead and go in there and like make some changes, I'll probably add like, hey, shape changer for when they're in combat, right? Although I wouldn't have a problem if they could simply just shape change on command as an adversary, but we'll see. Now, I think from the official adversaries, Pirate Captain, Raiders, and Tough Work, Courtier, Merchant, Baron, and Royal Advisor, Petty Noble, Monarch, Knight of the Realm, and Elite Soldiers work. And then, of course, there's some other scatterings of things in there that work for each of the individual kingdoms. Beast Feast. When a small village's monster defense system fails, the local heroes must venture into the endless caverns below to fix it, and cook up trouble for the creatures that stand in their way. The rustic, peaceful village of Elmore sits atop the Plover Caves, a labyrinthine system of caverns full of dangerous and delectable creatures. When the powerful magic keeping the villagers safe begins to fail, the bravest among them must descend into the caves to save the day. In a Beast Feast campaign, you'll play everyday heroes diving into the Plover Caves to reignite the magic lore that lies in its depths and cook up delicious meals. Welcome to a culinary world of zoophagous delights where the beasts you fight become the food you eat. Inciting incident. After the attack on Mayor Dougal, the local alchemist Karat, them approaches the party. Worried for the safety of the town, they ask the party to delve into the Plover Caves to locate a particular ingredient, ghost scorpion venom. Karat can transmute 12 drops of this venom into a spicy paste, which they can spread around the borders of the village to temporarily keep dangerous creatures at bay. Karat explains that ghost scorpions tend to make their nests by flattening the tall grass of the overgrowth into strange circular patterns. To get to the overgrowth, the party can follow the smell of jasmine to the northernmost chamber of the shallows, but if they ever smell lavender, run. Okay, so one of the first things that needs to be tweaked in the inciting incident is that I know it essentially says you go down to the depths to fix the lore, which is meant to be what fixes everything, but I actually think to get the lore and bring it back topside, right? It is not something that is simply staying down there that keeps everybody safe. It is something that is down there that needs to be brought up to the surface. The Beast Feast is actually pretty solid because it's so linear. You have to delve into the Plover Cave to reignite the magic lore in the depths, changing, as I've said, which to me means getting whatever from down there so to re-up the magical defenses, as I said. There's only a couple of things I'd tweak here. First, I'd say whatever the magical defense is that's been existing, no one knows what actually causes it to work. It's existed for ages and that's been lost to time. Then it starts to wane and that's why you need to go get a temporary solution before diving further. As shown on the map, there are various places where people could be living. More information could be gathered from ancient areas people haven't lived in, etc., until they eventually find a way down to the catacombs. Given the nature of this cave, it's unlikely they simply walk down hundreds and hundreds of miles, so get creative. On the note of the lore, I think it'll be a little tongue-in-cheek to have it be the actual lore of an anglerfish-like creature. As in so many years ago when the city was founded, whatever, the creature was found, the lore, their light was grabbed and brought topside, and it repelled monsters. But now it's waning, which no one knew that would happen, but some of the surviving text mentions something deeper in the catacombs, so off you go. Now, the adversaries. Okay, so I think that the Making Beast Feast section actually handles the part of this I wanted from other stuff, which is suggesting monsters. The Wyvern Tongue, Ooze Marrow, Acid Dragon Saliva, and Ogre Kidney couldn't be clearer on which monsters to grab, and genuinely, any non-humanoid could be good to go down there, so no notes there. But I will share the stat block for the lore. The lore is a tier 4 Colossus, mechanic stolen from Colossus of the Dryland. There's 4 parts: the Eska, which is the little dangly light thing on an actual anglerfish, the head, the torso, and 3 legs. The Eska needs to be destroyed to retrieve the lore to protect the city. The damage this monster deals directly is restricted to the leg and the head with the stomp ability and a bite swallow ability. The torso can shake off creatures and the fall damage could hurt them, but that's not directly from the creature. And if the players kill the lore, the next time they need to retrieve like the little light, the Eska, they're fucked because it's gone. The creature's dead. So they have to get the Eska, they have to learn about the Eska, and also learn that, hey, you can't kill this thing, otherwise it'll never redo itself. Next up, my second favorite campaign frame, Age of Umbra. In a dying world immersed in relentless shadow and nightmarish monsters, small communities hold fast to the light, hoping those who endure can find a way to save this broken realm before all is lost to darkness. A century has passed since the god king Othodias betrayed the pantheon, provoking divine punishment and abandonment by the gods that left the realm of the Halcyon domain shattered, desolate and eternally cursed. Throughout this shadow-cloaked land of decaying fortresses and dreadful monstrosities, surviving communities cling to hope in the face of lightless oblivion. In an Age of Umbra campaign, you play heroic survivors who protect their community from the terrors beyond their walls. Venture out into the unknown to hunt the nightmares that twist and grow with each fallen soul, seek answers to the curses that corrupt this world, and perhaps even discover a way to change its fate. The inciting incident. Recently, one of Okros' hunting bands, led by Hunt Master Evrados, Ridgeborn giant He-Hem, delved into the Shulk Chasm in search of resources. There, they stumbled upon an eroded, forgotten temple to an obscure veiled god. The Hunt Master was caught by a monster and dragged into the depths of the temple, and though the remaining 3 hunters sought to find him, a terrible odor forced them to withdraw out of fear and revulsion. When the band returned to the settlement and shared the news, Elder Akadona, Wanderborn Orc, she-her, and the village speakers debated the best course of action. Their heated debate was interrupted by Evrados' voice screaming for help from beyond the walls of the camp. Though scouts couldn't see Evrados in the murky swamp, the hunting band left the light of the pyre to rush to their hunt master's aid. The screams mercifully halted for a time. Then the screams broke out again, Evrados' lament joined by the wails of his hunters. The denizens of Okros are now terrified, the unsettling din heightening their agitation and fear. The shrieking doesn't change or wane over time, further exemplifying the unearthly nature of their cries. Desperate for an answer, Elder Akadona has gathered the party and requested that they investigate what happened to the Huntmaster and his crew, seeking to save them if possible and end their suffering if not. The gates of the settlement are opened, revealing the forlorn willows and mist-choked wetland valley beyond. The party must investigate the source of these cries for help and attempt to recover Okros' lost hunters. However, what monster is responsible and how do they steal the voices of those missing? What is the monster's connection to the uncovered temple, and if they recoil back into their lair, what dangers lie within? Are Huntmaster Evrados and his team beyond rescue? What other macabre revelations might require reaching out to another settlement? The adventure. Okay, so building off the inciting incident, first let's figure out what the veiled god is and what the creature is doing this. I think it should be the equivalent of a gibbering mouther. Of all the terrors created by foul sorcery, gibbering mouthers are among the most wicked and depraved. This creature is the composite eyes, mouth, and liquefied matter of its former victims. Driven to insanity by the destruction of their bodies and absorption into the mouther, those victims gibber in coherent madness. As far as I'm aware, we have the names of the following god: Aratu, the Dawning Sorrow, Tiras, and Xanathos. I'm also going to throw in Zidra, the Walker on the Path, meant to be a god that welcomes the dead to the next life. I made them for the first Daggerheart game I ever ran, which was the Crypt of Zothu. Now, none of those names work for me as far as what the Veiled God could be tied to aberrant creatures. I'm going to name this god Calamund, that which lurks, stealing that from Ganadar, a god of slimes, abominations, and creeping insanity from the Forgotten Realms. I'm going to make them a god of abominations. The gibbering mouther is an aberration and creeping insanity. Second, given the fact that the wailing stopped and then started again, I would add some sort of mechanic where, due to hearing the wails, the players would need to make an instinct reaction roll. 13, and on a failure, they take a -1 to hope rolls until they succeed with hope, just to represent the terrible nature of these wails, and it plays well into the creeping insanity aspect. Third, now on to the players. Leaving Okros and going into the swamplands. I think by the time they leave, the wailing has stopped. Their first encounter into the area isn't going to be with the gibbering aberration. They will, of course, follow the tracks of the hunters further into the swamplands and encounter some creature, caustic fungus, bug boar, will-o-wisp, just to wear them down a little bit, but they aren't meant to actually kill them. After that encounter, they continue following the tracks, making finesse reaction rolls frequently to stay hidden. The gibbering aberrant makes those wails when it notices creatures nearby. If they are quiet, they can start the combat off without the creature's gibbering going off. If the players failed the finesse reaction roll, the gibbering aberrant gets 1 free use of its gibbering ability. Once they've defeated the creature and it kind of dissolves, inside of it, they can find all the belongings of Huntmaster Evrados, Thythos, Roshir, Windcaller, and Galen Boulderback's equipment. When they enter the Shulk Chasm, just to really figure out what the hell happened here, following the information they got from the 3 hunters before their untimely demise, they find the eroded temple. There's various markings on the wall which are hard to understand, but they can make a knowledge roll to decipher what's being said. To piece together everything about this temple, they will need to make 3 to 5 knowledge rolls based on how the GM's feeling. This is not a particularly large temple. If they search around, they can find some tools, a book about Calamon that appears to be done by someone who is researching that which lurks, Briefly includes information about how it was sealed using the javelins. Feel free to throw in any extra stuff you think would be useful, but not game breaking as far as the unfolding mystery is. Eventually, they get to the back of the temple where they see a massive statue on a pentagonal base. It's a hooded figure in long robe with tentacles protruding out of the bottom and a featureless face under the hood. Around the statues are 5 javelin-sized spikes made out of a metal none of them are familiar with. Knowledge roll 18 success determines its platinum. 2 of them are glowing faintly and dimming by the second. Seeping into the ground from the base of the statue is a strange yellow ichor. At this point, it's just disgusting, not unbearable smell. Before they leave, the last 2 javelins have gone dark. Somehow, you should get them to take the javelins back, although I imagine they'll think to do that given them losing whatever power they had, and the yellow ichor noticeably begins to spread faster, but it's still going so, but also the smell gets worse. Once they pick up the spikes, they shrink to the size of a dagger. At this point, when the last javelin fades, you can have some sort of creature pop out and attack. You can have them be affected by the actual ichor in some way if they're there. The players can check out the abandoned settlement a few miles away from the entrance to the Shulk Chasm. This is a perfect place to give them more materials and possibly have them get into another fight or social encounter. Eventually, they get back to Okro, share the information, and once again get sent out to find Tenelith Alderbane, elf loreborn, any pronouns, who is said to have been alive during the apostasy and was even a holy person themselves. Their last known locations is the ruins of Bafador. See right there on the map. Once you get there, it's clear that this individual's mind has been affected by something. They've got a bunch of books and scrolls, some from the past, some with their own ramblings. If the players bring out the book that they found, they take it asking why they have their journal, but they can eventually get him to find information on Calamon. Platinum spikes were created by one Veil God and blessed by another Veil God in a number of different locations. That number can be determined by the GM depending on the length of the campaign. The 2 gods placed Calamon's essence into the statue. How it was done was not mentioned, and then they drove the spikes into the ground. The players get the locations of where the blessings need to happen, and the journey begins. There's a race against time to get the spikes blessed again and return before something terrible happens, which something terrible being a literal god is unleashed on the world. All the while, more of these aberrant creatures are being released into the Halcyon domain. Now, the adversaries. So I mentioned a caustic fungus, the bug boar, and the will-o-wisp. The caustic fungus is found in the Daggerheart Age of Umbra adversaries. The will-o-wisp and bug boar are in Hope and Fear. They're tier 1 and good to drop in if you want to use some of the player resources for a little bit. But let's talk about the 2 adversaries I created, the Gibbering Aberrant and the Razormouth. Based on the Gibbering Mouther, the Gibbering Aberrant is a tier 1 standard. It's got the Aberrant Ground ability, which makes the area within close range require an agility reaction roll to traverse. The meld reaction lets it essentially swallow a creature until it breaks free. Gibbering causes affected creatures to turn their hope die into a d8 until they succeed on a roll with hope. And the Razormouth is identical to the Living Tentacle from the Limb Wreath in Age of Umbra. So the Gibbering Mouther spits out one of the mouths on its body, which then turns it into a minion, which then attacks the players. Next up, Motherboard. In a world where magic takes the form of the technology left behind by a long-fallen civilization, a new threat rises as a malicious virus spreads through the machines that wander the wastes. Among the ancient ruins of the fallen world, the great walled cities of the Echo Vale sits as bastions of hope in an otherwise hostile land. Utilizing technology powered by a mysterious language that runs through metal threads, tethered high above the valley, the Citadel insulate their citizens from the waste where autonomous machines roam wild and massive wandering cities scour the land for scrap. But when a malicious virus infects the machine beasts that work alongside the people of the valley, the once docile creations turn violent. In a Motherboard campaign, you'll use technology instead of magic as you play extraordinary heroes, leaving the safety of the walled cities to travel the waste and bring peace to the Vale once more. The inciting incident. After the outbreak of the Remnant's fury, Argent city guards scrambled to subdue the violent machines, but wave after wave succumbed to the malicious virus and politicians grew more desperate to avoid widespread fear. Priv Maelor Rodek, Orderborn elf she-her, the city's charismatic leader, sent a messenger to assemble a team that has the skill and experience to handle remnants. Go undercover as civilians in the Mechanicus build sector and figure out what's causing the remnants' attack. Priv Rodek gives her word that any scrap the party acquires while protecting the city is theirs to keep. In return, she actively collects as many remnant cores as possible so she can pass them to her technomancer to diagnose the cause of the violence. She also gives the party the name of a surprising contact to see before they head into the scrap factory where many attacks have occurred. The contact is Mac the Scrapjack, Wanderborn Fawn he/him who runs an illegal scrap operation, making him an unlikely friend for the very person that outlaws his work. But on the Priv's word, he gives the party a hotspot. This illegal device can be carried as a backpack, and when set down and activated, it stalls out nearby remnants for a few moments, allowing the party to get out of a bind. He also gives the party an offer: save one of the remnant cores they recover and bring it to him instead of Rodek. He'll pay them a few quantum, and they'll have the opportunity to look at the data from the core to try and see what's causing all the ruckus with the rims. As they fight their way through the factory, does the party have compassion for the once tame remnants, or do they dispose of them indiscriminately? Will the players try to talk to the factory workers to learn more about the remnants' fury, or will they operate like a cleanup crew, keep their eye on the scrap they stand to gain? Will they bring the Priv all the remnant cores they collect, or will they save one for Mac and risk trouble from the city guard? If they perform well, will Priv Rodex tell the party more about the remnant's fury and involvement of the Motherboard? Alright, on to the adventure. The premise of this is continuing from the inciting incident. Regardless of how the players move and operate, they will eventually bring some information back to Priv Rodeck, which leads them further in. But here's how this happens, right? There was a glitch in the Motherboard which gave a bipedal remnant sentience, so think an android. Since it recalled all of its memories of people treating it like shit, it now wants to awaken the rest of its bipedal brethren. It doesn't care about the animal ones and have them rise up against the population and subjugate them instead. She sent out the corrupting code. Now, after the inciting incident happens, Priv Rodex and a bunch of teams have to figure out what's going on after they've shown oh, hey, we can handle these things, and they bring back information, which means she sends them out across the Echo Veil to check all the data wells. And for each well that they actually upload information about, they get sent some quantum into their accounts. In order to get that quantum, they do have to upload the information on a specific mechanical device that they're given when they leave. First data well they go to, they're of course attacked by some machines, but eventually get the information they need and are able to program their little companion device to scan for the signature they found as they travel. Players can make knowledge rolls to try and send less information than they have gathered to the Priv if they're not quite trusting her with any of this stuff. As shown on the map, there are data wells scattered everywhere. The more they process, the stronger the signature gets, and the easier it is to find the initial remnant that started all of this. Of course, this remnant isn't just sitting idly by as all this is happening. Even though she triggered the remnant's fury, she didn't give sentience to all of those that turned on the people. To do it to everyone, she'd need to break into the Motherboard, which is not an option at this point, so she's awakening them locally bit by bit until she has enough companions to break into it and change the world as we know it. Now, the Adversaries. Motherboard's lack of adversaries is honestly the most frustrating for me. For all the other campaign frames I brought up, you could arguably grab useful monsters straight from the existing adversaries and be done with it, but the nature of the Motherboard campaign makes that a bit harder in my opinion, without some tweaking and reskinning, right? Which is not something you really have to do for all the other ones. You know how I mentioned campaign frames being on a B- to an A scale for me, with Cost of the Dryland being A+? This is a B. The lowest B you can have before C, simply for the lack of machine adversaries. But since this was based off of Horizon Zero Dawn, I made adversaries from the game. We've got the Observer and the Flame Talon, aka the legally distinct Watcher and Fireclaw. The Observer is a tier 1 skulk and has pack tactics, which lets it deal additional damage when other Watchers are around. It has magic resistance, which lowers magical damage, electronic screech, which notifies other machines, and flash, which blinds people for a little bit. Next up, we have the Flame Talon. It's a tier 3 solo and has relentless 3s, resistance to magic, can ignite its claws to deal more damage, a ranged attack with a fire rock, and of course, Lava Geyser, which it kind of digs its hands into the ground, shoots in that flame that it can produce, and spews up lava geysers all around you, which changes the battlefield and of course actually sets people on fire. Yeah, that's pretty much it, gang. I just really wanted a little more guidance when it came to what's going on after the inciting incident with the way that we get with Colossus of the Drylands, and I wanted some additional adversaries in there. But again, overall, all of the campaign frames, at least in the core book, because Hope and Fear is out and I haven't taken a look at the new ones, all of the campaign frames thus far are a solid B- to A range outside of Colossus of the Dryland. But thanks for being here, folks. See you next time. Peace out.